Welcome, everyone. We're so excited for you to be here. I am Allie Maxwell. I'm the Associate Head of School at the Forman School. We are so excited to be here with such a diverse group of participants, from educators to parents to prospective parents or people who just are looking to celebrate neurodiversity. And I wanted to take a moment just to let you know that this presentation is going to be recorded and we will email it out to all participants. There is a chat that you can put in questions throughout the entire presentation, and we will answer them at the end. If you have any other questions afterwards, we will also provide contact information at the end. And now I will pass it off to Jenai and Chris, who are going to get us started.
Hi there, my name is Jenai Fitzpatrick. I'm the Chief Cognition and Learning Officer here at Forman, and I'm very excited to be here with you all. Thank you.
And I'm Chris Simmers. I'm the Director of Cognition and Learning. And yes, thank you all for being here for our second webinar of the school year. So our topic tonight is working memory in action, turning research into everyday learning strategies. And before we jump in, we're just going to give you an overview of what tonight's going to look like. We're going to start with just what is working memory. This might be something that you've heard of before. It might be a brand new concept for you. Either way, you're in the right place. And then we're going to talk about how working memory connects with neurodiversity. At Forman, we serve neurodiverse learners, and there are some interesting things to think about when we're thinking about working memory supports for our neurodiverse learners. Then we're going to get to our research-informed strategies. And we know, because we have such a broad audience here tonight, which is what we want, we've really aimed for the most applicable, easy to implement strategies that you can use in a range of settings. So whether you're a parent or a teacher, you're going to walk away with something you can use tonight or tomorrow. Of course, we always like to share why you might be interested in the way we do things here at Forman as well. And then we will save time at the end for questions, but please, we have the chat open. We know that participants won't see each other's messages, but we do see your messages. So at any point, as questions pop up, please put them in the chat, and we will have time at the end to get to some of them, maybe not all of them, but we'll do our best. So to get you primed for working memory, to get you in this headspace, if you have a piece of paper and a pen, it would be great to grab it now to just jot some things down. If you don't have it, that's fine too. But what I'm going to ask you to do is take about 30 seconds, a little less, and write one thing you know or have heard about working memory. If you want to pop it in the chat, that's fine. If you're in a room with someone and you want to say to them, that's fine. Just take a second. What do you know, or what have you heard about working memory? I'm hoping we get some messages popping up in the chat. Okay, so why did we ask you to do that? This is one of my favorite strategies for getting any brain primed for new learning. In the book Powerful Teaching, they call this a brain dump. You could also call it a 1-minute paper. Just the idea of when you're about to introduce new information or bring up a topic with any learner, you want to take a second to see what they already know. And what we were actually doing just now is asking you to search your long-term memory. What do you already know about this topic, or what does it make you think of? When we do this, one thing that we're doing is activating your prior knowledge, which is super important, especially when you're going to be introducing new ideas. Dr. Tracy Takahuma Espinosa often says, new knowledge passes through the filter of prior knowledge. You can think of prior knowledge almost as Velcro. So you want to get that prior knowledge activated so the new knowledge coming in has something to stick to. So a brain dump helps to activate your prior knowledge. It helps to activate your schema. What ideas, what concepts do you already have about this topic? It also helps with memory consolidation. Every time you pull something from long-term memory, you're actually making that memory a bit stronger. And it can be a form of retrieval practice. Our teachers may have heard of this, just a way to see what your students can remember or see what your learners can remember. And again, every time you're retrieving information from your long-term memory, you're making that memory stronger, which then makes it easier for you to retrieve again in the future. So that's our little primer. But now we're going to go a little bit further into what this working memory is and what it feels like when you are stretching your own working memory. So I'm going to call on another great resource, Andrew Watson. He's written many books in this area and blogs, does excellent work, and he has one of my favorite working memory examples. It's way more fun to do in person, but I just hope that you all are going to play along with me. And I'm going to ask you to say out loud your phone number. Pretty easy, right? You do this in person, everybody says it right away, no problem. Now, I'm going to ask you to tell me your phone number, but backwards. You do this in person, and this is where you see all the faces start to go funny, right? Because people are straining to try to hold that number in their head and manipulate it to flip it around backwards. And I'll just tell you now, most people can do that, but it's way harder than their phone number. When they say their phone number, it's right there. You ask them to say it backwards, and it's like this mental strain. They'll look off to the side because what we're asking them to do is different. Now, what if I asked you to tell me your phone number backwards and subtract 2 from each digit? In person, this is where you hear the groan in the room, like, oh, it's impossible, right? Now, every person in this webinar is fully mathematically capable of telling me their phone number backwards and subtracting 2 from each digit. What support do you need to make that the easiest thing in the world? Well, just a piece of paper, right? If you can write that down, it's no problem. But the issue is when we ask you to do it in your head, it's an incredible tax on your working memory. So when we go through those, when you're pulling your phone number, just phone number from memory, that's coming from your long-term memory. You've done it tons of times, really easy to pull up, doesn't take a lot of mental capacity. When we ask you what's your phone number backwards, you're then taking that information and holding it in your brain to manipulate it. That's your working memory. And working memory is limited. That's going to be one of the points we come back to time and time again. Your ability to process information in working memory for all humans is limited. And manipulating your phone number backwards is pretty tricky, but most adults can do it. When we add one more step to that and say, what is your phone number backwards and take 2 away, that for most will be working memory overload. It is just too much to hold in your working memory space. Are you mathematically capable of completing that problem? 100%. You just need some kind of scaffold. It's too much to hold in your brain at once. So working memory is incredibly important when it comes to learning. And this is just meant to give you a bit of an intro into what it feels like, right, to try to use your working memory and what happens when that working memory gets overloaded, even with a task that's fairly straightforward. So Andrew Watson describes working memory as where you select information. So you pulled that phone number from long-term memory. You said, what all do I remember? I find the information I need. Then I hold it in that space in my brain, metaphorically speaking. It's not a physical space in your brain, but it's the area where you select information, hold it, you can reorganize it and recombine it in different ways. So that's what your working memory does. And Andrew highlights that no academic information gets into long-term memory except through working memory. That's important. We're going to look at what that looks like very soon. But regardless of what it is you're trying to learn, it's important to remember that all new learning has to pass through working memory in order to make it into long-term memory. Many people will call working memory the bottleneck in learning because our long-term memory is essentially unlimited. Researchers have not identified a limit to how much we can store in our long-term memory, nor how long something can be held there. But there is quite a limit to how much we can hold in working memory. Different estimates will be around 4 to 7 bits of information. That's a little bit of a complex topic. We'll get into that a little bit in a second. So to think about what this looks like, I chose the most simple possible model of learning one could find. This is from the Center for Transformative Teaching and Learning. They also have a built-out model than this because obviously there are many more factors at play in learning. But at its most simple, if we think of learning as taking in information or stimuli from your environment, then it passes through your active working memory, and from there, it can get moved into your long-term memory. And also when you're remembering things like your phone number, you're pulling it from your long-term memory into your active working memory as the site of awareness and of thinking. So lots of things we could talk about here, but today is really like an intro to this topic, active working memory. What does it mean in the classroom? What does it mean out of the classroom? And what does it mean for our neurodiverse learners? So another quick little game, just take a few seconds, read through these letters. I'm going to take it away. How many do you remember? What letters do you remember? Write them down, put them in the chat, put a percentage in the chat. There. Oh, thank you for responding. 6, 4. Yep. The first 7, the first 6. CIA, excellent. Okay, excellent. Thank you for playing along. That makes it so much more fun. 1, thank you for your honesty. Okay, we're going to try it again. Now, how many do you remember? 75%, big jump there. And some just listing them, CIA, NBA, FBI, 12 but out of order. Yep. Excellent. So what's the difference there? What happened? Same letters. They were the same letters. But what happened? They were grouped into meaningful units. And so when you think about working memory as the ability to hold a certain number of bits of information in your memory, yeah, they're acronyms. Excellent. And there's context. Thank you for the chat. If I can only hold about 4 to 7 bits of information in my working memory at one time, when I'm able to group that information into one meaningful unit, that becomes 1 bit. So rather than the letters N, B, and A as 3 separate bits of information, I can use meaning and schema to make that 1. Way easier to remember by association. Yeah, thank you for engaging in the chat. So that's the connection between schema and working memory. And this is a great analogy that I first saw from Dr. Sarah Oberle about how this works. So if we think of these bits of information, like those isolated letters, if each of those dots is an isolated letter, then we can expect that we're only going to be able to hold about 4 to 7 of them in our working memory at any one time. So all that information, there's no way I can hold on to all of it. I'm only going to be able to hold on to a few. But what happens if we can put those into groupings that have meaning? Like, instead of just being the letters C, I, and A, I link those together to CIA, and that becomes 1 unit. Now, how much can I hold? Now, by taking the information and making sure that it is, well, putting it in meaningful units and also connecting it to our prior knowledge, what we already know, we are able to hold more in our working memory. So that's going to be really important when we think about our different ways to support our learners, because also really important to remember that the younger you are, the more limited your working memory capacity is in general. And we're going to talk a little bit about neurodiverse learners. Students with certain learner profiles are more likely to face working memory challenges. So just a reminder that when we're talking about neurodiversity, lots of different ways to define it. We're talking about just the natural variation in how people's brains process information. And at Forman, we always like to underscore that we see neurodiversity as a difference, not a deficit. Comes with all kinds of unique strengths and challenges, and working memory can come into play there. So lots of research done on different learner profiles with working memory. Some really common findings are that it's really common for students with ADHD to face working memory challenges. The estimate there will vary, but it can go as high as about 80%. There's also strong research to suggest that students with dyslexia will often face working memory challenges. Both of these make sense when you think of working memory as like processing power. So if you have ADHD and you are using some processing power just to attend or to filter through information, that's taking up some of your capacity. With dyslexia, if you're trying to decode and like any additional processing going on is going to impact your working memory. There's also research showing that students with dyscalculia can face working memory challenges. Interestingly, there are typically two main types of working memory. One is called verbal auditory, and the other is visual spatial. And for students with dyscalculia, it can be more of the visual spatial working memory that they face challenges with. So all that to say, if you are dealing with neurodiverse learners, it's important to just have this on your radar. It absolutely depends on the individual learner. A diagnosis does not equal challenges in working memory. It's just something to be aware of that might exist. We know that all students will benefit from working memory support. Any student, K to 12, even up to age 25, will be developing their capacities here. And also really important to remember that working memory capacity will vary from one student to another. It will also vary within one student from one day to the next, from the morning to the evening. So a student's ability to process information in their working memory, it's always a moving target, which is why we as the adults have a special role to play. Jenai's going to talk about that, how you keep an eye on your learners and see signs for when working memory might be becoming a challenge, and some easy strategies you can use to help support all learners.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so now that we have an understanding that working memory support is beneficial for all children, we now know our job as the adults in the room, both as educators and parents, is to help scaffold their thinking, help scaffold their process. Not do it for them, but provide the supports that meet them where they're at. The goal, of course, is always finding their own independence. To get there, though, we help free up brain space so their brain can do the actual thinking. When it comes to working memory, our responsibility is threefold: to observe and support from the outside, to be the working memory, of course, temporarily, while students develop their own, and of course, to model strategies that make invisible thinking visible. I like to think of working memory as the mind's scratch pad. It holds, organizes, and manipulates information. And as we learned, as you get older, it does improve with time. I have to also admit, though, I even need some scaffolding from time to time to support my own working memory. So I think, to Chris's point, at any age, any of these strategies can actually be super helpful. For parents of teens, you might notice that one day your child seems fully capable, they are crushing it. The next day they forget something big. It's kind of like, what's going on here? That inconsistency isn't them being difficult or just trying to not do well, not do their best. It's actually their teenage brain learning to juggle increasing demands. Energy, stress, sleep, emotion also affect capacity. The bottom line is that you want to match support to the learner. The younger equals more hands-on typically, and older, let's think of it as more coaching and collaboration. All right, next slide, please. So now we're going to look at 5 research-informed strategies that support working memory in both children and teens. Some may feel obvious or familiar. That's because they're effective. The real secret is to notice what your child needs right now and tailor the support. And for our older teens, partner with them. Decide with them how to use each strategy so they actually want to use it. Okay, so this first one, it's about repetition and rehearsal. Say it, see it, repeat it. I know I personally do this all the time when I'm going from one room to the other to remember what I'm getting. My son will ask, "Mom, are you talking to yourself again?" Yes, I am, Luke. I am supporting my working memory. For younger students, repetition cements learning. So a 3rd grader I had worked with could never remember the end of the day routine until we practiced him repeating back the steps. First binder, then Chromebook, then water bottle. Within a week, he didn't need my cue anymore. He was able to repeat, and saying it out loud just solidified the process. And if you notice, we used the first and then framework, keeping that language very, very simple. At home, you could try tell me what you're going to do first. That quick verbal rehearsal anchors the plan in short-term memory. For teens, it might sound like talk me through your plan. What's your first move? A high schooler once told me saying it out loud makes my brain believe I've already started. How cool is that? Repetition helps information move into long-term storage. So when you say, let's say it one more time, you are helping them rewire for recall, and you are helping solidify that success. Number 2, show and tell. Then this is also known as dual coding, making information both verbal and visible. So think about words and pictures. When we combine them, we actually make thinking easier. For younger students, that might mean pairing written directions with icons or a picture checklist. One student I had worked with used a simple laminated morning chart. Once he could see what comes next, the power struggle melted away and he was able to flow through it effortlessly. For teens, it looks like digital planners, dashboards, or visible calendars. One student even said to me, if I can see my week, I can own it. This is also especially helpful for those who really struggle with time blindness. Another example, of course, is a visual timer, which I have mine right here. And Chris brought up a great example earlier today, which was when you have a picture of your child's clean bedroom right next to the light switch, for example, right? It's a cue, it's a reminder that allows them to remember what a clean room looks like, how to do it. It alleviates that working memory and the decision fatigue that may come with that process. Verbal and visual cues equal less overload. You're spreading the cognitive work across the brain instead of overusing one system. Next slide, please. All right, so this Chris actually nailed earlier. Connect to what they already know, right? Think of it as Velcro. So our brains are pattern seekers. New information sticks best when it hooks into something familiar. Even better when there's an emotional component. So in high school class or English class, they were reading a story and it says, what does the story remind you of? And does it remind you of anything in your life? And suddenly, when they took the moment to consider this and how it may tap or connect into something that's happening for them in that moment, the comprehension and recall improved tremendously. At home, you could say something like, this reminds me of that show you're watching. How do you think they're similar? A teen who couldn't remember key dates in history finally did when he tied them to music releases from the same era. So again, you're connecting to meaningful information to each child, only though they really know what that's going to be or what that's going to look like. But just prompting alone can be super powerful. So when new material connects to prior knowledge, the brain has fewer bits to juggle, freeing working memory for deeper thinking. Number 4, take it out of their head. This is essentially offloading onto the environment. So like Chris said, no one child or adult can hold everything mentally. When we offload steps into the environment, we reduce strain on working memory so that the brain can focus on thinking and not remembering. Young students, a simple first then card, a picture checklist, or sticky notes by the desk may be exactly what they need to help them move along. At home, a family command center, a checklist by the door, or a launch pad spot for backpacks. I've had a ton of students and clients that has been successful for. So just the location. And then for teens, really this is about creating systems that they co-own. So the Google Calendar, the shared to-dos, a whiteboard with today's top 3. I worked with a student who loved writing out the top 3 priorities every time they sat down to do their homework. One student also shared that I used to think of reminders as like cheating, and now I realize their strategy. That was such a win right there. This is also why checklists are such a powerhouse. Now, I know checklists, I feel like, are just talked about all the time and they get a bad rep, but the truth is that pilots and surgeons don't use them because they forget. They use them because checklists alleviate cognitive load and allow their brains to save the energy to do the actual job, whether it's flying or performing surgery. I think checklists can be created in whatever tone you need them to, right? Whether it's what you have to do, how to do an actual task, the steps there. I think they're phenomenal, and if you can get buy-in for it, I applaud. So again, externalizing frees the scratch pad, lowering cognitive load. Visible sequences prevent forgetting steps and decision fatigue, and the brain can problem solve because it isn't spending bandwidth holding the plan. So write it down, make it visible, and let the brain think, not carry. And strategy number 5, make it a habit. Habits are the brain's way of automating what used to take effort. Especially when you're tired or stressed, this becomes crucial. For younger students, routines create safety and predictability. Unpack, hang jacket, sit for morning meeting. Or walk in the door, unpack bag, have a snack, open homework folder. When that becomes automated, there's very little room for battle, right? They just expect that, they know that that's what's coming. They then also have the space to dive into the homework that's being asked of them. For teens, this becomes about rituals that run on autopilot, or even habit stacking. Connecting a new habit to an existing one removes some of the cognitive load, even more than starting from scratch. One student kept missing assignments until we built in a queue. After doing the dishes, check the planner. 3 weeks later, he didn't even think about it, and he just did it. Each habit frees up mental space for creativity and critical thinking. And again, it saves space on that scratch pad paper to do the higher, especially for our older students, to perform those high-level tasks that are being asked of them, to write that essay, to do that research, to study for that test. So the more we can allow that and create that space, the more likely they're going to find success, feel less frustrated, and feel that empowerment. Okay, so those 5 are the foundation. But as our students get older, new factors come into play, right? Like independence, pressure, emotion, and motivation. Let's layer in a few strategies designed specifically for teens, one that strengthens self-awareness and self-regulation. So remove the extra. Again, I know that this seems obvious, but because we are working in such a digital world with multiple devices, and typically we're doing the work on the multiple devices, it's really hard. But if you think about it, teens often overload their own working memory without realizing. Too many tabs open, too many notifications, too many thoughts. We teach them to simplify the workspace. So you close the extras, you silence the alerts, make the task visible, and do one thing fully. So every input, right, every ping, a visual, a text, this takes up brain bandwidth. Decluttering the environment declutters the mind. So one parent had shared with me, once my daughter started doing homework with her phone in the basket across the room, right, that was the ritual that they started, finished dinner, right before dinner, phone goes in the basket, dinner, then check planner. The phone remained in the basket, that's key. She finished her homework in half the time. That is not a coincidence. That is truly because she could fully focus and there was less noise, if you will. The second, emotional temperature check. So working memory can't do its job when emotions hijack the system. I'm sure you can acknowledge this for yourself on the days that you're feeling extra stressed, or you may be worrying about your child, or just thinking about what's going on that's distracting you. That's taking up your scratch pad, right? So when that's happening, let's think about it from your teen's perspective. If they're feeling anxious, angry, or embarrassed, that emotion sits in the same mental space where thinking should happen. So before problem solving, help them pause. Where's your energy at right now? Calm, tired, frustrated? So I'm sure you can all kind of connect with this, picture it, it's 10:30 and your teen's staring at a blank page. Before you say you need to focus, try, hey, what's your stress level right now? Small check-ins will help bring that prefrontal cortex kind of back online. And the calmer they can be, the more they are able to focus, and the more they are able to remove that scratch pad by talking about it first, the better off they'll be. And then lastly, this is kind of a jam-packed one, the 5-minute rule. So this is under the kind of thought of start with one and lower the entry barrier. So when teens say, I can't start, that's potentially working memory overload before step one. The brain is trying to hold the whole task at once on a tiny mental scratch pad, right? So if we shrink the load and make the first move visible, for example, you only have to start for 5 minutes. Write the title, read the first question, open the right doc. Even better if you can write out the first 3 micro steps. That offloads the plan from working memory so the brain isn't juggling steps while also trying to begin. One student who dreaded essays shared, I set 5 minutes, wrote the title and a topic sentence, and all of a sudden the intro was done. Once he started, his brain could sequence without carrying the whole outline in mind. So this offloads the plan from the prefrontal scratch pad, freeing working memory to focus on the doing, not the holding. Chunking at the start, so chunking exactly like Chris said, breaking them into smaller bits reduces cognitive load and decision fatigue. And then that tiny win boosts motivation, making continued work easier. So make the first step small and visible, free the scratch pad, and then start the clock. So just some quick look-fors. How do you know when your child or teen's working memory is overloaded? So they stop mid-task or lose their place. They skip steps or forget directions seconds after hearing them. They say, I can't start. I knew it, but now I can't remember. They look frustrated or tune out. Those aren't motivation issues. Those are capacity issues. The brain's scratch pad is full. When you see it, don't correct, scaffold. Reduce the number of steps, add visuals or notes, and do an emotional temperature check. When emotions run high, working memory runs low. Of course, the goal is calm focus, especially when we're sitting down for homework, right? So these strategies, from repetition and visuals to emotional awareness and 5-minute starts, all serve the same purpose: to lighten the load on the brain so students can think deeply, work independently, and feel successful. And yes, these things take time to work. Follow your intuition. If there's buy-in, give it time. If not, scratch it and try the next one. It might be posting a checklist. Instead of repeating directions, it might be a quick check-in before a task. Or maybe it's just saying, let's just start for 5 minutes. Remember, our working memory has more capacity when we reduce the noise, make thinking visible, and pair structure with calm. You want to lighten the load, not the expectation.
Thank you, Jenai and Chris. To transition to think about why families choose Forman, I think it's important to start with hearing from a student themselves, which is really a student shared at a parent panel for prospective families, kind of why Forman has transformed their lives. And they shared that they discovered that they were enough. And a lot of that has to do with the work that Chris and Jenai do day in and day out with our educators and with our students to make sure that our students know that we understand them as learners and have the appropriate amount of challenge and support so that they can do hard things and understand that that will help them thrive at Forman and beyond. So we had a colleague approach what our kind of goals are in a really visual image, which I'll share with you, which is that we want to build the scaffolding and then we want to take it off. We don't want to have the scaffold become part of the building. That's a super important part for how our students navigate independence and are successful in their life beyond Forman, which in most instances is college, but also is career and life as well. And we want to make sure that we're supporting all students in discovering themselves, knowing themselves, and being able to take that toolbox with them. We really want to graduate students who understand they're enough, that their differences are their strengths, that they can do hard things, that where they're challenged is where they grow, that they know themselves, they understand how to learn and lead, and that they're able to, right? They have the skills, that toolbox to bring with them to be successful after Forman. And we want to be there for their journey at Forman and afterwards. And it all starts with the foundational pieces of building relationships, which is at the heart of everything that we do. So if you are interested in any of that and would like to learn more, I wanted to make sure you knew who our admissions team are. They're a wonderful group of people with a variety of different roles and responsibilities at Forman, which is part of what also makes Forman special. So please know you can reach out to any of them. And again, I'm Allie Maxwell, Associate Head of School. So if you also have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I know that Chris and Jenai would too, and we're going to have an opportunity for questions in a moment. But I also wanted to highlight another event that's coming up, which is our open house. You would be able to meet Chris, Jenai, and I in person. We'd be so excited to see you there. You could fill out an inquiry form with this QR code, and know that we'll also be following up this webinar with an email to make sure you have the information as well. But we're super excited to welcome people on Monday, January 19th. And now we'll open everything up for questions. We'll give you a moment to put them in the Q&A or the chat. Either one works. So our first question came in, which is, are there different types of working memory?
Yes, so typically, when discussing working memory, usually it's divided into two categories: the verbal auditory and visual spatial. So verbal auditory is, I mean, my classic example is if you have if you're making a Starbucks run for a group of friends and you're keeping that list in your head, nearly all of us will do what's called a phonological loop. You repeat it in your head, like Jenai said, going through a house, she's repeating it in her head. So that's the verbal auditory. Visual spatial is more like, well, it can be multiple things. It can be remembering where things are, like where did I put certain things. When you're testing this, it's often like manipulating images in your head. So when you're doing like a visual spatial working memory test, it can be like, here's a 3D shape. What would it look like if you rotate it in these different ways? So yes, usually you'll see working memory divided into verbal auditory and visual spatial. And kids could have strengths in one and challenges in another.
Thank you so much. Could you talk about how working memory ties into executive function or impacts it?
Jenai, you want to take that one?
Sure, but feel free to jump in. Well, so the important thing to acknowledge, I think, is that working memory actually falls under the umbrella of executive function skills. And I see them as the how things get done, right? They are skills that we know we can learn, practice, and ideally master, but also acknowledging that many need supports throughout our lives. I still use many different supports, as I've already shared. So to me, our working memory does impact almost everything that we do, and it impacts our ability to complete any of the executive function skills. It's kind of like a modifier. And so if that is something that we know someone has challenges with, we do take that into consideration here at Forman as we start to build out strategies for executive function support overall. Chris, do you want to add to that?
I'll admit I was getting distracted by there's so many great questions coming in.
Yeah.
So.
I wonder if we could maybe go to a parent is sharing kind of navigating homework, feeling like their child is often behind, fighting help, and wondering about presenting with multiple strategies and letting them choose, and what does that look like?
And Jenai can also
Yeah.
speak to the teacher versus parent dynamic with this as well.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. So to me, this is really about executive function coaching. And so much of, uh, Chris just said it perfectly. Um, I am a parent. I have a middle schooler who wants nothing to do with any of my executive function skill suggestions or coaching. Whereas when I am the adult in the room that is not the parent, I may not even be suggesting anything new or anything that would be considered rocket science, but because it is coming from me and not mom or not dad, I have to admit it is usually heard differently. There is buy-in, and it's not just because, you know, well, you're just telling me to do that because it works for you. No, I am here as a non-biased, like just trying to offer you strategies. Here is this menu. Let's choose one that you think will work best for you. And so I love, I'm just rereading the question again. I would love to meet with this student and help present these strategies. And really it is about getting their buy-in. It's not about what I think is best or which strategy I think she would benefit from most. I would love to hear what her thoughts are. Absolutely.
I would just highlight, it seems like we have a fair amount of alum on the Zoom, which is great. We're so excited you're here. If you'd love to continue the conversation, please know you could reach out to us as well, because we're happy to talk about maybe how Forman's changed since you've been here, and would really appreciate the opportunity to connect. So please know that. And there was a question of if the presentation is recorded. It definitely is and will be emailed out to you. And then just to share maybe kind of the next question was around apps and how do they, maybe like phone apps, help with working memory, or kind of how would audiobooks potentially as a tool opposed to just teaching through reading and talking, which might be two separate questions.
Yeah, lots to say there. So I love the question about apps because so apps that will claim to strengthen your working memory is going to fall under like a larger umbrella of brain training apps that unfortunately aren't usually well supported by research, meaning you can show that when using the app for like let's use it for working memory. If it's an app that's meant to strengthen working memory, you can see improvement in the activities within the app. What research does not typically show is then transfer into other areas. So working memory has been really studied. It's a very tricky concept to study, but the general consensus from research right now is that it's not possible to train your working memory and increase capacity that way. The way that you increase your working memory capacity is really by making stronger connections to what's in your long-term memory, and by doing things like Jenai mentioned, routines, building routines into things to free up some of that space. So it's just a great thing to keep in mind whenever you see like brain training apps or products or things like that. Just like look one step further, and what you're looking for is not that the consumers are increasing their performance within that platform, but are they seeing transfer into other areas? Right now, currently with working memory, I don't think we have research to show that training apps can improve that specifically. And audiobooks can be a great tool depending on where your working memory, challenge is. If you're talking about somebody that has a reading challenge and they're using extra bandwidth to process, then absolutely audiobooks can be a way to kind of get around that challenge. And another tool to have available. Absolutely. Jenna, did you want to add anything there?
No, I was just going to say that I love audiobooks, and I feel I'm able to consume more and remember more from listening. So apparently that's my stronger working memory, perhaps.
That's great. I think one final question that we have is just, could you speak a little bit about how increase in technology use, which you kind of, I think, have hinted at times, of just the notifications and how that impacts working memory, but how might the increase in technology in academic settings impact working memory?
Let's see who wants to jump on it first. I think it's a big question. So like Jenai mentioned, especially if we're thinking about teens and technology, right? Just having the examples that she mentioned, multiple tabs open or having the phone nearby, even if I'm not touching it, right? It's there. There is you can think of it as like an added drain on your like mental processing ability that unfortunately, the younger you are, the less likely you are to recognize that drain accurately. So a teen will tell you, that doesn't bother me. This isn't impacting me. I can have the phone here. I can have these tabs open. It's an element of metacognition, right? As typically with learners, the younger they are, the less accurate they are in judging their own learning, and they will overestimate their ability to focus even when there are multiple distractions present. So technology is not inherently good or bad. It's all how you use it. What Jenai mentioned as strategies to support teens, like let's get everything in this workspace clear so we only have this one task. I use it for my dissertation. Like I will have just that document only. I will silence all notifications because no matter how determined I am or how much self-control I have, every extra blip is taking some element of a toll on my processing power. And the higher the demand of what we're asking learners to do, the more important it is that we kind of preserve all of their processing power for the task at hand. That's what comes to mind for me. Jenai, anything for you?
No, I mean, I agree with everything you said. And even again, when I'm doing my own work, same thing. I have to shut everything down. I need silence. And I mean, the tech really is nonstop. And that is just the reality. And so if I can remove those things, I know that I certainly have to do that to be able to bring my full abilities forward. And so just practicing, just helping, to what Chris was saying, just helping teens understand that that's what's happening and that is draining, is a great way to start practicing, especially as we help prepare them to shift into their next step beyond high school.
And I'll offer a quick counterpoint as well, just to underscore that it's not the what, it's the how. It's not the technology, but how it's being used. A colleague of mine at UConn, who's a very, very established professor, has ADHD and dyslexia, has different, learning differences, and now uses technology. He uses ChatGPT to help structure big tasks. Like Jenai was saying, if the whole big task is in your head, and that can seem overwhelming, you don't know where to start. And he actually shared that he's using tools like ChatGPT to say, this is the project, break it down into 15 steps. What do I do first? And so then he goes and does the thing, right? So when you think about technology and working memory, it's very, very multifaceted in ways that it can hinder, but also maybe ways that we can use it to support.
That sounds like it could be a great presentation on its own. Maybe that's an idea for a future topic. I think we want to thank you all for being such wonderful participants. We've really enjoyed our time together. I want to thank Chris and Jenai for sharing all of their wonderful knowledge with all of us. Remember that you can reach out to our admissions team, to any of us, or join us in person for the open house. We're really excited to hopefully meet you in person and always look for ways to connect. So thank you so much and have a great night.